My husband's funeral. Rain poured down, mirroring the tears I couldn't shed, as I watched my son, Daniel, skip it for a party. He missed everything. I just stood there dignified, while a cold dread settled in. He thought he got away with it. He had no idea what was waiting for him. Stay with me, follow my story, and tell me where you're listening from. I need to know someone else hears this. The relentless rain lashed against the cemetery's ancient oaks, each drop a percussive lament echoing the silent scream trapped in Catherine, Kate Albright's chest. She stood, a solitary figure draped in black silk, beside the gleaming mahogany casket that held her husband, Robert Rob Albright. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and wilting lilies, a morbid perfume for a day that marked the end of her world and the beginning of a chilling new reality. Her gaze, sharp and unwavering despite the tremor in her hands, was fixed on a single agonizing detail: the velvet-cushioned chair reserved for their son, Daniel. It stood conspicuously empty, a gaping void beneath the green canopy, mocking the somber occasion. Rob's oldest friends, business associates, and distant relatives formed a respectful, if slightly bewildered, semicircle around her, their hushed condolences barely audible over the drumming rain. Sarah Jenkins, Rob's impeccably dressed assistant, approached, her face etched with a performative sorrow. "Mrs. Albright," she whispered, her voice barely carrying above the deluge. "I am so terribly sorry." Daniel called. "Sophia's birthday celebration. You know, he sends his deepest regrets." Sophia, Daniel's latest conquest, a woman young enough to be his daughter, whose frivolous celebrations apparently held more weight than his own father's funeral. Kate merely inclined her head, a queen on her darkest day. Her face was a mask of stoic dignity, an impenetrable facade designed to conceal the hurricane of rage and betrayal churning within her. "Begin," Kate instructed the funeral director, her voice steady and clear, cutting through the rain and the murmuring crowd. It was a command, not a request, delivered with an authority that belied her trembling heart. As the final prayers were offered and the casket began its slow, inevitable descent into the cold, waiting earth, a wave of profound sorrow washed over her, mingled with a disturbing clarity. A memory, sharp and poignant, surfaced from the depths of her grief. Rob, just weeks ago, his hand frail in hers, his voice a rasp against the silence of their bedroom. "He's not ready for it, Catherine," he'd whispered, his eyes clouded with a sorrow she hadn't fully comprehended then. Maybe he never will be. He had made meticulous provisions for everything, for everyone, but Daniel had been the exception. "You'll know what to do," Rob had instructed, his gaze unwavering, placing a weighty, unspoken burden upon her shoulders. Watching the mahogany box disappear, swallowed by the earth without Daniel present to bid farewell, Kate finally understood. Rob had seen something she hadn't dared to acknowledge, a rot beneath the surface of their beloved son. The empty chair wasn't just an insult, it was a revelation. The reception at their penthouse apartment, usually a beacon of warmth and vibrant life, was a somber affair. Soft jazz played, a mournful counterpoint to the quiet conversations and the clinking of glasses. Kate moved among her guests, offering brief, gracious acknowledgments, all while her phone remained clutched in her hand. Every few minutes, she'd glance at the screen, a desperate, unspoken hope for a message, a call, an explanation from Daniel. Nothing. It was 4 hours later when Daniel finally made his grand entrance, Sophia clinging to his arm. He looked impeccably handsome, annoyingly carefree, a stark contrast to the grieving assembly. Sophia, however, was a garish splash of color in a sea of black, her cocktail dress entirely too festive, too bright, too alive for a funeral reception. A ripple of discomfort, almost imperceptible, passed through the room. Daniel offered Kate a cool, dismissive kiss on the cheek, his eyes already scanning the room of familiar faces. "Sorry we couldn't stay longer, Mother," he drawled, the words hollow, devoid of genuine emotion. "Victoria's party had been planned for months, you understand? Couldn't possibly cancel." He paused, a hint of accusation in his tone, as if she were the one being unreasonable. It was in that moment, seeing him clearly for the first time, the casual disregard, the entitled smirk, the complete absence of grief, that the last vestiges of maternal blindness crumbled. The reading of the will is tomorrow at 10 o'clock a.m. Daniel, Kate informed him, her voice startlingly calm, a shard of ice cutting through the polite hum of the room. Daniel's face soured. Tomorrow? Really? Mother, Sophia and I were just about to finalize our trip to Aspen. Can't it wait a few days? Sarah Jenkins, standing nearby with a tray of champagne flutes, gasped audibly, spilling a few drops. Old friends who had known Daniel since childhood turned away, their faces a mixture of embarrassment and pity. Kate's gaze hardened, her voice dropping to a near whisper, yet imbued with an unmistakable steel that silenced the room. No, Daniel, we cannot. You will be there, or the consequences will be significant. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken weight, a promise and a threat. Much later, after the last guest had departed and the silent apartment echoed with the vast emptiness of her new reality, Kate found herself in Rob's study. His scent still lingered, a phantom comfort. She traced the spines of his favorite books, her fingers brushing over familiar objects until she found it, a loose panel behind his grand leather armchair. Inside, nestled amongst old letters and faded photographs, was an envelope addressed to her in Rob's familiar, elegant script. Her hands trembled as she tore it open. Catherine, the letter began, if you are reading this, then Daniel has finally shown you who he truly is. Our son is not the man we raised him to be, and there's something you need to know about the house, the old one. The air in the executive conference room, usually a hub of brisk decision-making for Mitchell Shipping, was thick with a heavy, almost suffocating silence. Sunlight, pale and watery, struggled to penetrate the tall windows, casting long, somber shadows across the polished mahogany table. Arthur Vance, Rob's longtime attorney and a man who had become a trusted family friend, sat at the head, his neatly arranged stack of documents reflecting the methodical order of his life. He adjusted his glasses, a weary sigh escaping him, before he opened the thick, imposing will document. Around the table sat a peculiar assembly. Kate, poised and dignified in black, sat beside Daniel, whose fidgeting was a stark contrast to her stillness. Sophia, Daniel's latest arm candy, was brazenly scrolling through her phone, her lacquered nails tapping an impatient rhythm. Also present were Brenda and Emily, two of Rob's most loyal and longest-serving executives, their faces a mix of sorrow and apprehension. A representative from the Mitchell Foundation sat with a solemn expression, anticipating the company's philanthropic future, alongside a handful of other company executives whose futures hung in the balance. Daniel, oblivious to the gravity in the room, repeatedly checked his expensive watch, a barely concealed irritation flickering in his eyes. Sophia, with a sigh of boredom, returned to her endless social media feed, completely disrespectful of the occasion. Kate observed them both, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. Rob had seen this, hadn't he? He had seen all of it. Arthur cleared his throat, his gaze lingering on Kate for a moment, a silent message of shared grief. Mrs. Albright, my deepest condolences once again. Rob was a remarkable man and a dear friend. He then turned his attention to the documents. Robert's estate, after careful valuation of all assets, including Mitchell Shipping Company and his diverse investment portfolio, stands at approximately $1.2 billion. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Even Daniel paused his watch checking, his eyes widening. Sophia's phone clattered onto the table, forgotten. The magnitude of the sum seemed to press down on them all. Arthur continued, his voice steady. To Catherine Albright, his beloved wife, Robert has bequeathed their primary residence, the penthouse apartment, the summer home in Nantucket, all personal effects, in a cash sum of $50 million. Kate merely nodded, the figures registering, but without surprise. It was a testament to Rob's enduring love, a secure foundation for her future. Then came the moment Daniel had clearly been waiting for, the moment he believed would cement his inheritance. Arthur turned to a new page. The controlling voting shares of Mitchell Shipping Company are to be distributed as follows. To Daniel Albright, son of the deceased. Daniel visibly straightened, a smug, triumphant smile beginning to form on his lips. Sophia, seeing her gilded future materialize, beamed, a silent, "We did it," passing between them. He leaned forward, ready to accept his birthright. But Arthur wasn't finished. He paused, his gaze sweeping over Daniel before landing back on the document. Conditional upon the moral character clause outlined on page 27, section B. The smile vanished from Daniel's face, replaced by a frown of confusion, then dawning irritation. Conditional? What are you talking about, Arthur? What clause? Arthur, unperturbed by Daniel's demanding tone, methodically flipped through the pages, the rustle of paper loud in the suddenly hushed room. He found the section and began to read, his voice clear and resonant. This clause grants Catherine Albright, Robert's wife and the executor of his estate, sole and absolute discretion regarding Daniel Albright's conduct during Robert's final days and the subsequent funeral proceedings. A ripple of murmurs spread through the room. Daniel looked from Arthur to Kate, a cold dread creeping into his expression. Arthur continued, if Mrs. Albright deems Daniel's behavior to have been disrespectful, negligent, or otherwise inappropriate during this period, she holds the authority to fully redirect his intended inheritance as per the Alternative Distribution Plan C stipulated within this will. Daniel's face drained of color. He shot to his feet, knocking his chair backward. That can't be legal. You can't just cut someone out for something like that. Arthur remained unruffled. Mr. Albright, this clause was meticulously drafted and vetted by not one but 3 independent legal teams. It is entirely legal, binding, and unambiguous. He gestured to the signed attestations at the bottom of the page. All eyes turned to Kate. The weight of the moment was palpable. Arthur looked at her, his expression neutral, but his gaze held a subtle question, an acknowledgement of the difficult choice. Mrs. Albright, he asked directly, his voice cutting through the tension. Do you wish to invoke the moral character clause? Kate met his gaze, then slowly turned to Daniel. She saw the entitled fury, the complete lack of remorse, and in that moment, she recalled not just the empty chair at the funeral, but 42 years of small slights, petty excuses, and a fundamental selfishness that had slowly eroded the man she once thought she knew. She remembered Rob's words. He's not ready. Maybe he never will be. Her voice was calm, steady, and chillingly definitive. Yes, I invoke the clause. Daniel leaped to his feet again, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. Mother, you can't be serious. This is insane. Kate merely raised an eyebrow, her gaze unwavering. Where were you yesterday, Daniel? Where was your mourning? Where was your respect? Arthur, ignoring Daniel's sputtering protest, turned to the final section. Very well. In accordance with Robert's expressed wishes under Alternative Distribution Plan C, the Mitchell Shipping Company voting shares are to be divided as follows. 30% to the Robert Albright Foundation, ensuring the continuation of his philanthropic legacy. Another 30% will be allocated to Emily Davies, in recognition of her extraordinary dedication and unwavering loyalty to the company and Robert. A further 30% will be placed into a newly established employee pension fund, benefiting all long-serving members of Mitchell Shipping. And finally, the remaining 10% will be transferred to Mrs. Catherine Albright for her continued oversight and support of these new arrangements. Daniel stood frozen, his jaw slack, the color completely drained from his face as the reality of his utter disinheritance settled over him, crushing him beneath the weight of his own arrogance. Sophia, pale and trembling, could only stare, her hopes of luxury dissolving into thin air. Emily, meanwhile, sat stunned, tears welling in her eyes, not just from the immense gift, but from the profound trust Rob had placed in her. Sophia, her face a mask of scarlet fury, slammed her hand on the polished table, the sound echoing sharply in the tense silence. You planned this, she shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at Kate. This is elder manipulation. You coerced him. Arthur Vance, ever composed, adjusted his tie. Ms. Jenkins, he stated, his voice devoid of emotion. Robert Albright was of sound mind, and his legal team, my firm included, ensured every provision in this will reflect his unwavering intent. This is not manipulation, it is the protection of a legacy. Daniel, slumped in his chair, stared blankly at the table. The vibrant color had not returned to his face. So I get nothing, he murmured, his voice hollow, tinged with disbelief. 40 years as his son, and I get nothing. Kate met his gaze, her own eyes holding a depth of sorrow and steel. You received everything a son could want, Daniel, she said, her voice quiet but firm. A father who loved you unconditionally, who wanted nothing more than your respect, your presence, and your shared vision for his life's work. You chose to disregard it. A flicker of defiance sparked in Daniel's eyes. I'll contest this, he declared, pushing himself up, regaining some of his arrogant posture. This is ridiculous. It won't stand up in court. Arthur merely raised an eyebrow. Mr. Albright, I advise you to reconsider. Robert, with his characteristic foresight, included a no contest clause. Should any beneficiary challenge the validity of this will, they forfeit any and all provisions made for them, however minimal. Daniel paused, confusion replacing his bluster. Minimal? What minimal provisions? Arthur turned another page. To Daniel Albright, Rob bequeathed his very first desk, the one he started Mitchell Shipping from, currently in the basement archives. Also, the card table from his college days, and a collection of books on business ethics and corporate responsibility. He paused, allowing the almost cruel symbolism to sink in. These items are to be delivered to your primary residence within 30 days. The insult, stark and undeniable, hung heavy in the air. Sophia let out a disbelieving scoff. She snatched her designer handbag and stormed out of the room, her high heels clicking a furious rhythm down the hallway. Daniel, after a moment of stunned silence, followed her, but paused at the doorway, turning back to Kate. His eyes, usually clouded with indifference, now burned with a chilling, raw hatred. I'll never forgive you for this, Mother, he hissed, his voice low and venomous, a stark contrast to the quiet dignity of the room. Then he was gone. After the door clicked shut, leaving Kate alone with Arthur, Brenda, and Emily, a wave of exhaustion washed over her. Emily, her eyes still red-rimmed from the will reading, approached Kate and gently squeezed her hand. He deserved better, Mrs. Albright, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Grandpa deserved better than that. The endearment, usually reserved for grandchildren, felt fitting coming from Emily, who had worked for Rob for decades, almost like a daughter. Kate simply nodded, a profound ache in her chest. Heartbroken, yes, but also strangely resolute. Rob had seen Daniel's true colors, had trusted her to make this impossible choice, to protect his legacy from the very son he had loved. And she had. The following week unfolded like a carefully orchestrated psychological war. Daniel called 17 times by Kate's count, each conversation a different flavor of fury, bargaining, and veiled threats. He accused her of greed, senility, and betrayal, his voice a relentless assault. She responded with calm, measured statements, reiterating the facts of the will and Rob's intentions. Then Sophia appeared, unannounced, at the penthouse. She glided through the opulent living room, her eyes darting from one antique to another, lingering particularly on Rob's prized collection of vintage watches displayed in a glass cabinet. Her touch, as she ran a finger over the cool glass, was not one of admiration, but undisguised avarice. Such exquisite pieces, she purred, her smile too wide, too artificial. I suppose these are all yours now. Kate merely inclined her head. Sophia then launched into a flimsy justification for Daniel's absence at the funeral. Honestly, Mrs. Albright, it was just a formality anyway. Rob was already gone. What difference could it have made? Kate looked at her, truly seeing the calculating ambition in Sophia's eyes, the cold indifference beneath the veneer of charm. The difference, Sophia, was respect, something Rob deserved and something Daniel failed to give. The will reflects Rob's wishes, not my personal whim. Sophia's smile tightened. Well, Daniel's lawyers don't agree. This could turn into a very protracted, very public legal battle, Mrs. Albright. Are you prepared for that? Kate's gaze remained steady. If that's the path Daniel chooses, so be it. Rob was prepared for every eventuality. A few days later, Emily, looking visibly distressed, arrived at the penthouse unannounced. Mrs. Albright, she began, twisting her hands nervously. I've been hearing things. Daniel and Sophia are selling off some of their own assets, and they're spreading rumors that you're cash poor and cognitively impaired. They're trying to build a case that you were manipulated, that you aren't fit to manage the estate. Kate felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. It was worse than she thought. They weren't just angry, they were attacking her reputation, laying the groundwork for a full-blown legal assault. The confirmation came the next morning. Arthur called, his voice grave. Mrs. Albright, he stated, Daniel has filed preliminary paperwork contesting the will. The war, it seems, has officially begun. The initial volley of Daniel's legal attack landed swiftly and precisely. Arthur Vance, his face etched with concern, relayed the claims over the phone. His attorneys are arguing you're emotionally compromised, Mrs. Albright, he explained, and that Rob was under heavy medication in his final months, rendering him susceptible to undue influence. They're essentially painting you as a grieving, confused widow who manipulated her ailing husband. Kate listened, a steely resolve settling deeper within her. Tell them, Arthur, that Rob left me well prepared for this fight. Every contingency, every possibility was anticipated. Her voice, though quiet, resonated with unwavering conviction. Beyond the legal battle, an unexpected wellspring of support emerged from the heart of Mitchell Shipping. Employees, from seasoned captains to dock workers, rallied around Kate. They knew Rob's vision, his unwavering commitment to his workforce, and they implicitly understood the implications of Daniel's greed. Letters, emails, and even heartfelt phone calls flooded Kate's office, pledging loyalty to Rob's legacy. One message, particularly poignant, came from David Moreno, a shipping manager who had dedicated 30 years to the company. He shared how, years ago, when his youngest daughter was battling a rare form of cancer, Rob hadn't just provided the best health insurance. He'd personally ensured their family received every possible financial and emotional support, paying for treatments and therapies out of his own pocket when insurance caps were reached. He saved my family, Mrs. Albright, David had choked out over the phone. He didn't just care about ships, he cared about the people who sailed them. This outpouring cemented Kate's belief that she was fighting for something far greater than money or control. She was fighting for Rob's moral compass. The following afternoon, Sarah Jenkins, Rob's ever-efficient assistant, arrived at the penthouse, a sealed, unmarked envelope in her hand. Mrs. Albright, she said, her voice hushed. Mr. Albright gave this to me with very specific instructions. He said, for when Catherine needs to remember why she's fighting. Kate's heart pounded. She took the envelope, her fingers tracing the faint indentation of Rob's distinct handwriting. Inside, she found a small, tarnished brass key and a folded note with a single address. Storage Unit 447, Westside Industrial Park. A chilling sense of mystery, almost horror, prickled at her skin. Rob, always a step ahead, had left her a breadcrumb trail. She drove to the address, her anxiety mounting with each turn. The industrial park was a labyrinth of corrugated steel and chain-link fences. Unit 447 was nondescript, blending into the monotony of its neighbors. The key slid smoothly into the lock. Inside, the air was cool and still. The unit was sparsely furnished, a single, comfortable armchair, and facing it, a small television connected to an old-fashioned video camera on a tripod. On the TV screen, a sticky note simply read, "Press play." With trembling hands, Kate pressed the play button. The screen flickered to life, and then impossibly, Rob's face filled the frame. Not the gaunt, weary face of his final days, but a healthy, vibrant Rob, his eyes clear and full of his familiar warmth. He looked directly at the camera, at her, and offered a gentle, sorrowful smile. "Hello, my darling Catherine," he began, his voice strong and resonant, a ghostly echo in the quiet unit. "If you are watching this, it means Daniel has chosen his path, one that unfortunately does not align with the values we tried to instill in him, nor with the integrity of Mitchell Shipping." Rob continued, meticulously outlining years of documented evidence. Daniel's recurring mismanagement of crucial projects, his prolonged absences from executive meetings, financial reports detailing unexplained discrepancies, and a litany of employee complaints about his dismissive and often cruel conduct. I spent years hoping, praying that he would mature, that he would step up. But the evidence, Catherine, is undeniable. I couldn't risk everything we built, everything that supports thousands of families, on his caprice. His gaze softened, filled with a profound love that transcended the digital barrier. I needed to protect what we built, my love, for the thousands of families who depend on Mitchell Shipping, for their children's futures, for the legacy of stability and responsibility we championed. He concluded, his voice imbued with a quiet wisdom. Stay strong, my love. Remember this. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for our children is to hold them accountable, to allow them to face the consequences of their own choices, even when it breaks our hearts. Kate sat there long after the video ended, the silence of the unit pressing in on her. Tears streamed down her face, not just from grief, but from the overwhelming sense of vindication and renewed resolve. Rob had foreseen all of it. He hadn't just prepared a will, he had prepared her, fortifying her with his truth, his unwavering moral compass. She left the unit, the key now clutched tightly in her palm, feeling stronger than she had in weeks. The path ahead was clear. Just days later, the legal papers arrived in a thick binder. 56 pages of allegations, each one a calculated jab at her capacity, her character, her very marriage. The media, scenting blood, seized upon the story. Headlines blared, Mitchell shipping, air battles widow over billion-dollar estate, portraying her as a greedy opportunist. Sarah, ever proactive, presented Kate with a comprehensive media strategy, complete with pre-recorded interviews and a trove of videos detailing Daniel's poor conduct over the years. "We can hit back hard, Mrs. Albright," Sarah urged, her voice brimming with righteous indignation. "Show them who he really is." But Kate, recalling Rob's quiet strength, shook her head. "Not yet, Sarah," she said, her voice calm. "We won't fire the first public shot. We will let them play their hand. My husband taught me patience, and he taught me that true power lies not in immediate retaliation, but in choosing the right moment to reveal the truth." The fight had begun, vicious in public, exactly as Daniel had intended. Yet even as the storm gathered, Rob, ever the strategist, had one more safeguard. Sarah Jenkins appeared at the penthouse a few days later, her expression solemn, holding another sealed envelope. "Mrs. Albright," she murmured, "Mr. Albright gave this to me with instructions to deliver it only if things became difficult. He called it his nuclear option." Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a small memory card. Kate's fingers trembled as she held it, a premonition of dread washing over her. She knew instinctively that this small chip of data held a truth she might not be ready for. Alone in Rob's study, she inserted the card into his old laptop. The footage began, a chilling, unedited chronicle spanning years. Daniel, heavily intoxicated, slurring insults at a high-profile company dinner, forcing Rob to discreetly escort him out while making apologies to shocked clients. Another clip showed a vicious argument, Daniel's face contorted in rage, screaming at Rob about perceived slights and demanding control, while Rob, pale and weary, tried to reason with him. The most agonizing footage, however, depicted Daniel and Sophia on what appeared to be a video call with friends, openly mocking Rob's declining health, Sophia laughing shrilly as Daniel mimicked Rob's labored breathing. The casual cruelty, the utter lack of empathy, sent a sickening jolt through Kate. This wasn't just misbehavior, it was a profound, soul-deep betrayal. Sick at heart, a cold nausea churning in her stomach, Kate ejected the card. Rob had left the ultimate choice to her, to expose this raw, unflattering truth or to bury it. She locked the memory card away in Rob's personal safe, the combination known only to them. It was a potent weapon, one she hoped she would never have to deploy. The thought of inflicting such public humiliation on her own son, however deserving, tore at her maternal instincts. But the memory of Rob's pained face in the videos, his quiet dignity under assault, hardened her resolve. Meanwhile, Daniel's legal team pressed their offensive. To counter their claims of her cognitive impairment, Kate underwent a grueling series of examinations by 3 independent psychological experts. The sessions were exhaustive, delving into her memories, her emotional state, her decision-making processes. Each question felt like an intrusion, a deliberate attempt to chip away at her composure. Yet, through it all, she remained steadfast, answering with a calm clarity that defied the chaos swirling around her. Arthur later confirmed the reports, his relief palpable. "Mrs. Albright, all 3 experts have concluded you are perfectly competent, exhibiting appropriate grief, and show no signs of impairment or susceptibility to manipulation. Your testimony will be unimpeachable." It was a small victory, but a crucial one. However, Arthur continued, his voice taking on a graver tone, I must warn you, Daniel has retained Evelyn Reed. She's known as the Cobra in legal circles, Chicago's most aggressive estate litigator. Her specialty is character assassination. You must prepare yourself, Catherine. She will attempt to provoke you, to unravel you on the stand. There will be no low she won't stoop to. That night, sleep remained an elusive comfort. The image of Daniel's sneering face on the video, the memory of Rob's quiet suffering, haunted her. She wandered into Rob's study, a sanctuary of his presence, and found herself drawn to a worn leather journal tucked away in a hidden drawer of his desk. Its cover was etched with the date 5 years earlier. Rob's elegant script filled the pages, beginning with a familiar lament. Daniel missed another board meeting today. He sends a flimsy excuse about a networking event in Miami. When did my son start believing he deserves power without responsibility? When did he stop caring about the very legacy he stands to inherit? Kate read for hours, tears streaming down her face as Rob painstakingly chronicled his slow, agonizing realization. Entry after entry detailed Daniel's escalating negligence, his growing arrogance, Rob's desperate attempts to guide him, to teach him, to love him into becoming the man he knew Daniel could be. He wrote of his heartbreak, his sleepless nights, and the crushing burden of having to choose between his son and the company, the thousands of families that depended on him. His final entry, scrawled just 2 weeks before his death, was a heart-wrenching testament to his enduring love and sorrow. The hardest part of dying, Catherine, is knowing I won't be here to help Daniel become the man he could still be. I pray that somehow, through this, he finds his way. The journal was not just a record, it was Rob's soul laid bare, a testament to his love, his pain, and his profound wisdom. It fortified Kate's spirit, erasing any lingering doubts. The next morning, she called Emily. Emily, can you do something for me? Deliver a message to Daniel. Tell him I'm willing to meet him. Just the two of us. No lawyers, no Sophia. 2 days later, Daniel arrived at the penthouse. He looked different, the usual carefree arrogance replaced by a strained weariness, new lines etched around his eyes. He clearly wasn't sleeping either. Kate met him in the formal sitting room, offering no warmth, only a quiet resolve. Daniel, she began, her voice calm, I'm giving you one last chance to withdraw this lawsuit, to stop this before it gets even uglier. He scoffed, a bitter, humorless laugh. Withdraw? You've stolen my birthright, Mother, and you expect me to just walk away? Kate's gaze remained steady. I have Rob's videos, Daniel, all of them, documenting everything. Daniel froze, the blood draining from his face, his eyes wide with a sudden primal fear. Then his expression hardened, a mask of cold defiance settling over his features. Release whatever you want, he sneered, his voice chillingly confident. Who do you think people will believe? The grieving widow or the greedy son? The courthouse steps were a frenzied circus of flashing cameras and shouting reporters. As Arthur Vance guided Kate through the throng, her hand gripped his arm, a silent anchor in the storm. The air crackled with the hunger of the press, their questions sharp and invasive, trying to pierce her composure. She met their stares with a dignified, unyielding gaze, her black suit a stark contrast to the chaos. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Every seat was taken, filled with curious onlookers, Mitchell shipping executives, and sympathetic friends. Kate scanned the faces, finding Emily seated near the back, offering a small, brave smile of solidarity. It was a lifeline in the suffocating atmosphere. Then the doors swung open and Daniel entered, Sophia clinging to his arm. She was dressed in a conservative, widow-like black dress, an almost comical attempt at mourning that only highlighted her calculating ambition. Behind them strode Evelyn Reed, a formidable woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper reputation. The Cobra, Arthur had called her, and the moniker seemed to fit. Judge Eleanor Vance, a woman known for her keen intellect and no-nonsense demeanor, called the preliminary hearing to order. The gavel's rap echoed like a shot, signaling the true commencement of hostilities. Evelyn Reed, Daniel's attorney, wasted no time. Her voice, though calm, was imbued with an insidious power as she laid out her argument. Your Honor, she began, we contend that Mrs. Albright unduly influenced a heavily medicated Robert Albright, a man whose cognitive functions were demonstrably declining in his final months. This so-called moral character clause is nothing more than a thinly veiled attempt to disinherit his only son for the personal vindictiveness of a grieving widow. Arthur rose, his response measured and firm. Your Honor, Mr. Albright was certified mentally competent by 3 independent physicians just weeks before his passing. The moral character clause, far from being vindictive, was a meticulously crafted legal instrument, entirely consistent with Mr. Albright's long-standing concerns regarding his son's conduct and commitment to the family business. Reed, however, was prepared. We have a deposition, Your Honor, she announced, from Mr. Albright's personal chef, a man who witnessed Mrs. Albright's venomous disposition firsthand. She then played an audio clip, the chef's voice, hesitant but clear. I overheard Mrs. Albright say, Daniel doesn't deserve anything you built. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom, and hostile glances flickered towards Kate. Arthur, unperturbed, stepped forward. Your Honor, Ms. Reed presents a truncated, misleading excerpt. We have a recording of the entire conversation made by Mr. Albright himself, who, as we have established, was of sound mind. He then played an audio file. Kate's voice, filled with a pained frustration, filled the room. Thomas, she had said, her voice choked with emotion. Daniel doesn't deserve anything you built if he can't even visit you when you're dying. Then came Rob's voice, weak but resolute, tinged with a deep, weary sorrow. I know, Catherine. I've known for years. A powerful murmur ran through the courtroom. The full context, delivered from Rob's own lips, utterly dismantled Reed's attempt to paint Kate as a manipulative schemer. It was a moment of profound vindication, a testament to Rob's foresight and his unwavering love. Judge Vance, her expression unreadable, rapped her gavel. Order. Given the complexities of this case and the highly personal nature of the dispute, I am ordering both parties to mandatory mediation. This is an opportunity for private resolution, gentlemen. I expect good faith from both sides. Outside the courthouse, Daniel seized the opportunity for another public performance. No son, he declared to the eagerly awaiting cameras, his voice resonating with false sincerity, should be disinherited for missing part of a funeral. This is an outrage, an attack on family values. Kate, hearing his sanitized, self-pitying narrative, felt a surge of indignation. She stepped forward, ignoring Arthur's cautionary glance. This case isn't about a missed funeral, she stated, her voice clear and strong, cutting through the clamor. It's about honoring Robert Albright's carefully considered wishes. It's about preserving a legacy built on integrity and hard work, not on entitlement. Later that evening, as Kate tried to process the day's emotional roller coaster, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily, her message stark and chilling. Mrs. Albright, I just overheard Sophia and Daniel. They're planning to release false medical records claiming Rob was incapacitated, and they're going to subpoena Laura Miller, Daniel's first wife. She's going to testify you never liked Sophia and turned Rob against her. A cold dread settled over Kate. False medical records? Dragging Laura into this? Twisting old family tensions into legal ammunition? The battle was escalating, becoming uglier, more personal than she could have imagined. She clutched her phone, her gaze fixed on the darkening city skyline, a profound weariness seeping into her bones. How much more could she endure? How much more would Rob's legacy demand? Was the cost of protecting his memory too high, even for her? The legal battle was one front, but another more immediate crisis erupted from within Mitchell Shipping itself. Michael Chen, the company's acting CEO, and a man whose loyalty to Rob was absolute, called Kate with grave news. Mrs. Albright, his voice was tight with stress, we have a problem with May, the European contract. They're threatening to pull her business, $140 million. May was a 20-year client, a bedrock of Mitchell Shipping's international operations. What happened? Kate demanded, a cold dread seizing her. Daniel, Michael explained, his exasperation evident. He contacted their leadership directly, claiming he would soon resume control of the company and implying the current management was unstable. It's caused significant leadership uncertainty, as they put it. Kate's jaw tightened. Daniel was actively sabotaging his father's legacy, destabilizing the very company he claimed was his birthright. There was no time to lose. She immediately initiated a video conference with May's senior executives, personally reassuring them. Her calm demeanor combined with a detailed explanation of Rob's meticulously planned internal succession slowly assuaged their fears. Robert's vision remains our guiding principle, she vowed, and his legacy of integrity and reliability will continue. The crisis was averted for now, but the damage Daniel had attempted was undeniable. Michael called again later that day, his tone urgent. Mrs. Albright, there's more. Sophia has been aggressively soliciting senior staff for information, asking probing questions about upcoming bids, client lists, and Daniel, he's been accessing sensitive company files through his old network credentials, despite his limited role. Kate felt a surge of cold fury. This wasn't just about inheritance. It was corporate espionage, a betrayal of trust that threatened the livelihoods of thousands. Immediately, she ordered, her voice like ice, restrict Daniel's access to all company systems. Change every password. He is now an employee actively working against company interests. And notify legal. The next morning, Daniel stormed into the executive suite at Mitchell Shipping headquarters, his face flushed with a terrifying rage. He bypassed Michael Chen, who merely stood aside, his expression grim. Daniel burst into Kate's office without knocking. You've locked me out, he roared, his voice echoing off the glass walls. You've locked me out of my own company's systems. Kate, seated calmly behind Rob's desk, looked up, her expression unyielding. Your father's company, Daniel, she corrected, her voice quiet but firm. The one you're currently trying to damage, the one you deliberately tried to destabilize by calling May. He stared at her, disbelief warring with fury. You resent me, don't you? He spat, his eyes blazing. You always resented that Dad was grooming me, preparing me for this. You wanted it all for yourself. Kate sighed, a weary sadness entering her voice. Daniel, your father and I spent 20 years trying to interest you in the actual business, beyond the corner office and the lavish expense accounts. We wanted you to understand the responsibility, the dedication required. But you never did. She leaned forward, her gaze piercing. Shall I list your documented failures? The missed board meetings, the botched negotiations, the fact that you wouldn't recognize half of our key employees if they stood in front of you? He reeled back as if struck. He was proud of me, he insisted, his voice cracking. My father was proud of my achievements. He loved you desperately, Daniel, Kate replied, her voice softening, laced with a heartbreaking truth. That's different from pride. He loved you, and because he loved you, he wanted you to live up to your potential, to honor the values he built his company on. He wanted you to be more than just his son. He wanted you to be a man of integrity. Kate then leaned back, a new speculative glint in her eyes. Speaking of integrity, do you really believe Sophia would stay by your side if there's no inheritance coming? If all this luxury disappears? Daniel scoffed. Sophia loves me. She's not like that. Isn't she? Kate asked, her gaze unwavering. Emily overheard something, Daniel. While your father was in the hospital fighting for his life, Sophia was complaining about having to visit him. She called it putting in her time. Daniel went completely still. The rage, the bluster drained from his face, leaving behind a stark, hollow shock. It was as if a veil had been ripped from his eyes, revealing a truth he had desperately tried to ignore. Just then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and the name Sophia flashed. His composure, already shattered, crumbled further. She needs me at the lawyer's office, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper. He looked at Kate, his eyes wide, lost. Kate, seeing the flicker of vulnerability, the raw pain of a child realizing a harsh truth, delivered her final, devastating words, spoken not with anger, but with profound sorrow. Robert's greatest regret, Daniel, wasn't disinheriting you. It was failing to help you become the man he knew you could be. He never stopped trying. Even in his last days, he hoped you would choose differently. He hoped you would come home. The phone rang late that night, jarring Kate from a fitful sleep. It was Emily, her voice choked with sobs. Mrs. Albright, she whispered, I couldn't help it. After what Daniel said, I told him everything about Sophia, about her saying she was putting in her time at the hospital. I had to. Kate listened, a complex mix of emotions churning within her. Emily's loyalty was fierce, her pain over Rob's passing still raw. Kate understood. "It's all right, Emily," she said, her voice gentle. Perhaps it was time he heard the truth. Hours later, as the first pale light of dawn crept through the penthouse windows, her phone buzzed again. A text from Daniel. It was short, direct, and entirely unexpected. "We need to talk, not about the lawsuit, about Dad." A fragile flicker of hope ignited within Kate's weary heart. This was it, the conversation she had both dreaded and yearned for. She knew instinctively that it wouldn't be easy, but perhaps, finally, it was a step toward healing. That Saturday morning, she rose early, moving through the quiet penthouse kitchen with a sense of purpose. She prepared Rob's traditional weekend breakfast, perfectly scrambled eggs, thick slices of sourdough toast, and 2 cups of strong black coffee, just the way he liked it. The aroma filled the space, a poignant ghost of happier times. Precisely at 8 a.m., the doorbell chimed. Kate opened it to find Daniel standing there alone. Gone was the arrogant swagger, the designer suit. He looked visibly exhausted, his hair disheveled, a shadow of stubble on his jaw. His eyes, usually hard with defiance, now held a haunted, vulnerable quality. He looked like a man who hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, hadn't cared for himself. He looked finally like a lost son. He stepped inside, his gaze falling on the breakfast spread on the kitchen island. A faint, almost wistful smile touched his lips. "You remembered," he murmured, his voice hoarse. "Some traditions matter enough to preserve." They sat, the silence stretching between them, broken only by the clinking of forks on plates. Daniel ate slowly, without much appetite, his eyes darting around the familiar kitchen, perhaps seeing it with new eyes. Finally he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Sophia's gone." Kate looked at him, her heart aching for the raw pain in his words. Despite everything, he was still her son. "I'm so sorry, Daniel," she said, her sympathy genuine. He swallowed hard, then began to recount the story. "I confronted her about what Emily said. She denied it, of course. Tried to turn it back on me, on you. Said it was all lies, a setup. But I saw it in her eyes, Mother. The way she tried to deflect. The anger when I wouldn't back down." He paused, a bitter laugh escaping him. "She packed her bags. Said she wouldn't stay with a broke loser who was too stupid to fight for what was rightfully his." His gaze dropped to his hands, clenched tightly on the table. "She took all her jewelry, even the tennis bracelet, the one I gave her from Laura." The last detail hit Kate like a punch to the gut. The bracelet, a symbol of a past love, given to a woman who had never truly loved him. Kate reached across the table, her hand covering his. It was a gesture she hadn't made in years, a silent offering of comfort that transcended the anger and betrayal. He flinched, then relaxed into her touch, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. Daniel's eyes then fell upon a small, leather-bound notebook lying beside his plate. It was Rob's. "What's this?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Your father kept a journal," Kate said softly. "His thoughts about everything. About you." She pushed it gently towards him. "Read it, Daniel. It's for you." He picked it up, his fingers tracing the worn cover. For the next 20 minutes, Daniel read in silence. His shoulders, initially hunched in defiance, slowly sagged. His eyes, once burning with anger, now welled with tears that he openly wiped away with the back of his hand. The raw grief, long suppressed, finally broke through, replacing every trace of resentment. He closed the journal, his voice barely a whisper, thick with emotion. "He never told me any of this. I didn't know him at all, did I?" Kate's heart broke for him. "You knew the father who loved you unconditionally, Daniel," she clarified, her voice gentle. "The father who longed for you to succeed. You didn't know the man who built something extraordinary, the man who carried the weight of thousands of lives on his shoulders, because you never bothered to look past your own expectations." He nodded slowly, the truth settling in, heavy and undeniable. He took a deep, shuddering breath. "I'm dropping the lawsuit," he announced, his voice firmer now, infused with a newfound humility. "Because Dad was right. I haven't earned it. I haven't earned any of it." He looked at Kate, his eyes pleading for something she hadn't seen in years. Guidance. I, I need to apologize to Emily and to Michael. I might need help finding the right words. 1 year later, the world had shed its morning black for the vibrant greens of spring. The anniversary of Rob's death dawned clear and bright, a stark contrast to the deluge that had accompanied his burial. Kate stood by his grave, a simple granite headstone now marking his final resting place, the polished stone reflecting the gentle morning light. Beside her were Daniel and Emily, a tableau of quiet remembrance. Together they lay 3 pristine white roses against the cold stone, a silent tribute to a man who had profoundly shaped their lives. Kate observed Daniel. He was different. The expensive, flashy suits had been replaced by a modest, well-tailored tie and a crisp shirt, suitable for his new role. His eyes, though still holding a trace of past pain, now sparkled with a genuine warmth, a clarity she hadn't seen in years. Daniel had found his purpose, not in the corner office he once coveted, but as the community outreach director for the Robert Albright Foundation. He was channeling his energy, his intellect, into something truly meaningful, something beyond personal wealth. Emily, who was now pursuing her master's degree with the help of Rob's generous bequest, smiled at Kate. "You should have heard Daniel at the scholarship ceremony last week, Mrs. Albright," she said, her voice full of admiration. His speech, it was genuinely moving. He spoke about the power of education, about giving back. Daniel, hearing this, offered a genuine, unforced smile. "True legacy isn't about money or buildings," he said, his gaze fixed on his father's name etched in stone. "It's about the impact you have on lives. That's what Dad taught me eventually." He lingered for a moment and then turned to Kate, a familiar flicker of his old, ambitious self, now tempered with humility. "Mom, Donayan," he began, the word feeling both new and utterly right. "I've been working on a proposal to expand the Foundation's educational initiative to underserved areas. It's ambitious, but I think Dad would approve. Would you mind reviewing it later?" Kate felt a surge of warmth at his use of mom, a simple word that carried the weight of their long, arduous journey. "I would be honored, Daniel," she said, her voice soft with emotion. She linked her arm through his, a gesture of maternal pride and restored connection. As they walked slowly away from the gravesite, leaving Rob to the quiet embrace of the earth, Kate looked out at the tranquil cemetery, a faint smile touching her lips. "This, Daniel," she addressed the unseen witnesses one last time, "this is the true inheritance. Not just the wealth, but the wisdom, the redemption, the second chance. It's what Rob always wanted for us all." Daniel gave her a curious look, a faint frown creasing his brow. "Who are you talking to, Mom?" Kate squeezed his arm gently. "Just an old woman's habit, darling. Sharing our family's story. Perhaps it might help others understand. Perhaps it might encourage someone else to choose differently." Daniel nodded thoughtfully, a flicker of understanding dawning in his eyes. He knew now that their story wasn't just their own. As they drove away from the cemetery, leaving Rob's quiet resting place behind, Kate knew with profound certainty that Rob's painful choice had achieved not punishment, but transformation. Daniel wouldn't lead Mitchell Shipping, a path he was never truly suited for, but he was becoming the man his father had believed he could be. The son who had once scorned responsibility was now embracing it, finding fulfillment in purpose rather than privilege. Robert Albright's true legacy, she realized, was measured not in the $1 billion he amassed, but in the wisdom received, the difficult lessons learned, in the broken relationships carefully, painfully restored. His love, however tough, had ultimately prevailed. The empty chair at Robert's funeral, a year ago today, will forever be etched in my memory. That was the moment I truly understood that my son Daniel had yet to grasp the sacrifices his father made, the true meaning of legacy. While Robert Albright built his shipping empire from nothing, Daniel enjoyed its fruits without ever understanding the sweat and blood behind it, choosing a frivolous birthday celebration over his father's final farewell. Sarah, Robert's assistant, could only whisper apologies, but the truth was undeniable. But Robert, in his profound wisdom, knew this day might come. His moral character clause was not an act of vengeance, but a painful, necessary lesson. Today, standing beside his grave with Daniel placing a white rose, I see the man Robert always hoped he would become. Daniel, now finding purpose in the Robert Albright Foundation, understands that true legacy isn't about money or buildings. It's about impact on lives. It was a brutal path, a courtroom drama that exposed the rawest edges of our family. But Robert's difficult choice didn't punish Daniel. It transformed him. He might not lead Mitchell Shipping, but he is finally honoring his father's name, not with inherited wealth, but with earned wisdom and a restored heart. Robert's greatest legacy wasn't his billions, but the hard-won redemption of his son.